So I think we are beginning. We have only one presentation today. It's by Hélène Bello and Maud Pugliese. It's about Canada. They've asked for 30 minutes instead of 20 minutes to present their material because they say they need more time because they have a lot of background information to provide. Since they are the only one to speak this morning, I thought it wasn't such a big problem. So they'll have 30 minutes, 15 minutes for more or less 15 minutes for discussion and questions. So basically, we should be over in about 45, 50 minutes. So here you go. Julie, make sure that they, okay, great. They can share the PowerPoint.
Okay. So thank you, Benoit. We would like to thank the committee who organized this event, and special thanks to Benoit Lapente and Julie Louin. Some of you probably know that our provincial government is now engaged in a public consultation for a major family law reform. So your questions, your comments will be of great interest to us since the economic issues are central to this debate. In Quebec, when a person announces that she will get married, there are two possible reactions. The first one is very positive. Congratulations are coming from everywhere, as in most countries. The second reaction, which is very common in Quebec, is one of astonishment. But why are you getting married? Are you getting married for religious reasons or administrative one? Are you adopting abroad? These questions testified to what is happening in Quebec. Getting married is no longer, getting married no longer goes without saying. In Quebec, unmarried cohabitants are known as de facto spouses. And in this presentation, we will use the terms unmarried cohabitants, de facto spouses, and common law unions as synonyms. However, it is important to remember that despite the fact that there are so many unmarried couples in Quebec, it's more than 40%, Quebec is the only province in Canada that has not conducted a legal framework for these unions. Until recently, marriage was the normative crossroads, so religious, legal, social norms converge for people to get married. Nowadays, it is not because marriage is not so central in today's society that conjugal life has less social norms. On the contrary, there are still many standards which are sometimes more difficult to identify because they are more diffuse or less institutionalized. This has led us to focus on day-to-day money management within couples and then on redistribution in the area of retirement savings to understand through speech and practices how couples and family standards evolve. I'm a sociologist and I will explain you the laws that concern family and couples relationships in Quebec with my simple words, hoping that the translation from French to English won't mislead you. Don't hesitate to ask questions. Nowadays, the process of financially preparing for retirement is becoming increasingly important and individualized. This is because time spent in retirement has increased tremendously with the growth of life expectancies. Canadians now spend about 15 years in retirement on average. Additionally, defined benefit employers' pension schemes and public pensions are banning, forcing individuals to acquire private assets ahead of retirement. Those insights are prompting research on retirement wealth inequality. In 2020, even though the male breadwinner model is no longer the norm, we know that numerous couples continue to have unequal earnings and therefore an unequal saving capacity. Can we say without a doubt that all spouses plan their retirement together and try to equalize savings on both of them? Retirement scholars and policymakers have traditionally assumed that conjugality is an equalizing force in retirement planning. But studies have found that many disparities in investment within couple, and that couple don't always share their accumulated wealth. Those disparities seems to be larger among spouses with an income differential than between equal earners, and they typically disfavor women. This shows that not all couples share their accumulated wealth. And in this paper, we ask the following question. Since not all couples equalize their savings, when they are financially heterogamous couples, are some of them redistributive in their retirement savings? We examine financially heterogamous couples and their redistributive practices regarding intra-household savings. Then this brings us to the following questions that will be addressed in this presentation. What proportion of couples in a financially heterogamous union seeks to balance the retirement savings of their partners? And who are they? Are they married or not? What is the union duration? In this paper, we explore how various individual and relationship characteristics shape the management of retirement savings. In this presentation here, we will focus on married and unmarried couples. So here is the legal context of Quebec. Private law relates to horizontal relationships, that is to say, the relations between individuals, between parent, child. Is it okay? I hear some noise. No? Okay, sorry. Okay, so between a child and his parents, or between married spouses. At the present time, de facto couples are virtually absent from the civil code. Since 1989, we have a law that we call the family patrimony, which only concerns married spouses. This law says that at the time of divorce, the value of some properties must be shared between spouses, regardless of the type of marriage contract they have signed. These assets are the family house, goods and furniture, the secondary house, the car and used to transport the family, and pension funds. Couples who live in a de facto relationship have no protection. Although Quebec is known to be a progressive society, this province is the only province in Canada to have no protection for unmarried cohabitants. Even if the de facto partners have lived for 10 years together, they have had children, which is the case of Lola versus Eric. They are seen by the law as strangers. Upon conjugal breakdown, each partner leaves with what he or she paid for, and they have no alimony responsibility to one another. They are responsible for their children, however. For example, if the man paid for the house, the car, and the furniture, and the lady paid for the children's clothes, the food, and so on, at the end of the relationship, she will go away with her empty grocery bags. Today, the legislature wanted to preserve the free choice of de facto spouses, free choice to decide not to marry. And I will come back to this question. On the other side of the slide, you have social and tax legislations, which concerns vertical relations between the state and all citizens. The logic is imperative, so couples don't have a free choice here. The idea is not to discriminate according to marital status. All social and financial laws in Quebec and also federal legislations treat de facto couples in the same way as married couples after 1 or 3 years of cohabitation. When people do their tax filing, and in Quebec we have 2, which is quite complicated, if the facto couples have only 1 year of cohabitation, they must declare it, and the state will treat them as though they were married. And that's since the 1990s. The problem for ordinary citizens is that the state, so the Quebec legislature, says two things. In the civil code, it is different, very different to be married or not in Quebec, but facing the taxes, it's the same thing. And every year when they report that tax, people are told that it's the same thing to be married or not. There is a fairly similar situation in England, and Barlow and her colleague identified it as the common law marriage myth, where people think that after a few years of cohabitation, it's the same thing to be married. In Quebec, I called it the myth of automatic marriage. So 80% of people know that they will be treated the same way before the taxes legislation. So Quebec would be the leader of de facto unions, where we have the numbers, the statistics to demonstrate it. 40% of couples live in a de facto relationship, while compared to the rest of Canada, which is 16%. And in 2016, it was 56% of couples aged 20 to 49 who were unmarried cohabitants. 62% of children are born out of wedlock, and in some French-speaking regions, it's more than 80%. Now we'll turn to the money management among couples. While a few studies have explored how couples manage their retirement savings per se, long lines of research have examined the day-to-day conjugal organization of money or income. Scholars in this field have long argued that married couples are more likely to pool their resources than cohabitants. For example, okay, here are the numbers of a study we made in Quebec. For example, well, there are very many, a variety of ways of managing money. In the dark, and there are two different logics. One logic, it's the pooling of income, and the other one is the sharing of expenses. In the blue zones, the dark blue, the concept, you find the family income, the pooling system. The concept of family income refers to the pooling of all incomes of both spouses, and their more or less egalitarian redistribution between spouses. This is really the idea of family income, which is at the base of most of our social policies. And you can see that about half of the couples use this manage money this way. In the light blue, it's what we call the allocation system, when one of the spouse gives a part of his income to the other one, so that the other one can pay for all the things that are related to the household. I don't bring it with the pooling of income because this person, the person who receives the allocation, doesn't have access to all the money of the family. And on the other logic, you have the sharing of expenses, which are the red and yellow parts. Spouses make a list of expenses, common expenses, which is different from a couple to the other. Generally, the common expenses include electricity, food, rent, children, sometimes leisure, and so on. So they can share half and half, or they can share in proportion to their income. And what we see as differences here is that we can see that there are some differences between married and unmarried couples, but in some we see differences between those two, but note that these differences are clearly not those that we could have expected in regard to the legislature and in regard to what we see in other parts of the world. And we could ask, what explains those differences? duration of union and the presence of common children are the main things that can explain in our opinion. In part, the differences lies in the characteristics of married and cohabitation couple, especially cohabitation duration. On the left are the married couples, and on the right, de facto spouses. We ask all the spouses since when they were living together. And on average, married couples have lived 3.5 years since when they lived 3.5 years of cohabitation on the wedding day. To compare married couples with de facto couples, we though distinguished those who had less than 4 years and of cohabitation and those who had more than 4 years of common life, instead of simply comparing married versus unmarried couples as we do usually. In the left-hand column of the two tables, we find couples with less than 4 years of life together. And we can see that married couples are twice as likely as unmarried couples to put all their income together. However, after 4 years of cohabitation, the gap is reduced considerably. The common life makes an important difference for de facto spouses. Many manage money separately at the beginning of their relationship and gradually put their income together over the years. Other perspectives instead stress the differences between the level of commitment and independent values of married and unmarried couples. According to this view, because common law entails fewer mutual obligations between couples, people who are more individualistic and who do not want to commit self-select into common law rather than marriage. The idea would, of course, suggest that married couples are more likely to be redistributive in their retirement savings than common law spouses. However, the autonomist position is based on 3 assumptions that we have to underline. Individuals know the law and make an informed choice. In earlier qualitative works, research results show that people in the de facto unions do not always know the legal differences between being married or not. Many assume that they have the same legal status because under fiscal law, as I said, they are treated as if they were married. So they did not opt for common law to avoid obligations, but for many other reasons, such as not having religious beliefs, the cost of getting married, etc. The insight lead us to the following research hypothesis. The differences between married and common law spouses are likely to depend on the legal knowledge. We expect that a sizable proportion of common law spouses do not know that their rights and responsibility are not the same as for married. We expect that these common law couples are very similar to married couples in their attitudes and commitments. Therefore, they would have a similar behavior as married regarding the management of retirement. The other cohabiting spouses who know the legal distinction can be expected to differ from the married. That living in a de facto relationship is a free choice on the part of both partners of the couple. Our study showed that about 28% of unmarried couples in 28% of unmarried couples, one spouse would like to get married and the other doesn't want to get married. And the third assumption is that is the one of equality of principle as opposed to de facto unions. Oh, I should have. No, okay, sorry. So here are the hypotheses. Differences. So yes, differences exist between married and common law unions regarding the management of retirement savings. And our second hypothesis is that those differences depend on the legal knowledge of common law spouses, and we expect a sharp difference between married spouse and common law spouse who are aware of the distinction of the distinct legal status of cohabitation, and weaker differences between married spouses and common law spouse who are unaware of the distinction of legal status. I will let my colleague Maude Pugliese continue.
Okay, hi. So, all right, so those are the hypotheses that we wanted to explore. We employed data, we got data from a survey that was fielded in 2015 by Bureau des Intervieweurs Professionnels, which is a survey firm here in Quebec, in Montreal. The survey was designed by Hélène and Carmen Lavallée as part of a broader project in seeking to compare married and common law couples, and it was financed by a short grant. So I'm sorry, Hélène, could you just quickly go back to the other, just to mention that the survey was fielded by both phone and internet. And also the study sought to target only working age couple, the overarching research project. So we have about 3,000 respondents, a little over 3,000 respondents to the survey that were all partnered adults aged between 20 and 50. And so I'll be happy to speak more about the sampling procedures and so on and so forth in the question period. So as Hélène mentioned, in this particular study, we were interested in financially heterogamous couples. So couples who don't have the same economic resources, capacities. So to identify that subsample, we define them as couples in which neither partner earns less than 40% of the spouse's combined incomes. So we tried playing with, slightly different versions of this definition, and our results are not sensitive to that. Also, just a quick mention that in many cases, some cases, the spouse's income was missing. And so in those cases, a follow-up question sorry, Hélène, could you just go back to thank you. A follow-up question asked, so do you earn about the same as your spouse or a little more or less? And so we employed that additional follow-up question to constitute the financially heterogamous group. And so by those criterion, it's nearly 2,000 people that fell into this financially heterogamous definition. Okay, so next slide. In terms of measures, so this is how we, so the outcome variable first, it's a characterization of management strategies for retirement savings, and it has 3 categories. So not saving for retirement at all, saving individually, and employing some kind of redistributive management strategy for retirement savings. And this is based on the following survey question that asks, considering retirement, select the statement most closely matching your situation. We do not save for retirement, we save individually and independently, and we try to balance long-term savings across partners. Okay, we can change the slide. Independent variable, the main one, has 3 categories. So first, married couples. Second, de facto union. And we create 2 categories, right, of de facto unions, some in which the respondent is aware of the legal distinctions between marriage and common law, and those in which the respondent is unaware. So for this distinction, we employed the survey question that asks, is the following statement true or false? After a few years of cohabitation, common law couples have the same legal status as married couples. So those that responded true to this statement are classified or coded as unaware of the legal distinctions. A few people, very few, I think it's less than 200, no, not even 200, like it's 200 in the overall sample, but there are very few people saying don't know. We ended up treating them as missing values, but it didn't really change anything if we classified them with the true, right, as unaware, since they don't really know, but our results are not really sensitive to that. So next slide. We have also other covariates in the paper and control factors, including union duration, the presence of common and stepchildren, age, incomes, education, who's the primary earner, women or men, respondent or spouse. And so we can perhaps talk more about those during the question period if need be. In terms of model, we employ a simple multinomial logistic model. So we contrast both, so that it has two parts, and we contrast both not saving at all and individual or independent saving strategies with the relative risk of a redistributive retirement strategies. So all the control factors are included, and of course in our study we're more interested in the second part of this model, right? The independent versus redistributive strategy among those who save. Okay, we can change. Just a quick note, I mentioned it, the income variables, they have quite relatively high proportion of missing values. As I said, in constructing our sample, this was not much of a problem because of the follow-up question. But when we try to add those variables as control factors, then it's a little concerning. So we employed multiple imputation to address that. We also tried not including those as controls at all, or using just list-wise deletion, and we're not really seeing any major changes to the results. So just a quick mention. So results. Just descriptive statistics, 26% of our sample are not saving at all for retirement. 46 people saving individually, 28% having a redistributive strategy. So overall, among those who save, it's 38% of savers who are redistributive by our criterion. So regarding the main independent variable, 51% are married, and among the common law union, what we see is basically almost half of them are unaware of the distinct legal treatment between marriage and cohabitation. So this is just so here, just for space, right? This is the regression results, and all the control factors are in the model, but we're just showing the results for the main independent variable and the intercept. And what you're seeing is the sort of the first line is the beta, between parentheses, it's the standard error, and then below is the risk ratio associated with each category. And so the main finding that I would like to draw your attention to is what is in red, right? So what this is saying is that there are really important differences between cohabiting couples who are aware of legal distinctions and married couples in terms of their relative risk of independent versus redistributive saving. So couples cohabiting, if they are aware of the legal distinctions, their relative risk of an independent strategy is more than twice that is observed among the married. But in the other group, right, the group of cohabiting couples who are not aware of the legal distinctions, we observe almost no difference at all compared to the married, and any difference is not statistically significant. This is very much in line with the hypothesis that Hélène presented. Just a quick note that we find very little difference in the relative risk of not saving at all between married couples and cohabiting unions in this paper. So to conclude very quickly, I wanted to perhaps just discuss a few, point out a few of the limitations, right, of the study. And perhaps the most obvious one is the question we employ, the question we employ to characterize the saving strategies, right? So it's a very general question, asking people to brush a broad, paint of what their strategy looks like. And we use this because there are multiple ways in which financially heterogamous couples could be implementing a redistributive strategy, right? A primary earner, for example, could be contributing to the spouse's retirement account, transferring money to him or her, allowing free withdrawals from a common pot for savings, having joint accounts. So we didn't want to pinpoint any of those. And so the general question reflects that. But we do agree that it would be important future research to attempt to collect data on retirement savings in a more nuanced way. Also, obviously, the age range, retirement savings, it continues well beyond 50. And so it would also be important to explore what's happening in this age group. And finally, just note that we do not have information on the value of savings or accumulated assets, neither on factors such as previous separations. So we couldn't control for these things or explore how it's shaping. And then just in terms of contributions, implications, we see 38% of couples in our sample, right, so the couples who save, they are redistributive. So this is, I think, a sizable minority, but it's not a majority. And so I think this result really suggests we should avoid, right, assuming that couples, especially the financially heterogamous ones, are saving together, and that lower income partners, who tend to be women, are necessarily well prepared for retirement if they are, just because they are partnered with someone who is saving. Also, data is collected mostly at the household level, wealth data in most countries, with some exception, mainly Germany. And so it would be better to also collect data at the individual level. Next slide. And so, Hélène, do you want to comment on this, or I can finish on? Okay, so just also, this is showing that in line with previous works, right, that common law spouses are diverse. They're a diverse group. And in our case, for example, we see not all are aware of the legal distinctions. And so presumably not all are individualistic couples who seek to avoid obligations. And this is reflected by the fact that when unaware of the legal distinctions, common law couples show similar redistributive behaviors, at least regarding retirement savings, as married people. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Hélène and Maud. Just before taking questions, I will, if you allow me to do it, I would add a few background information. You provided background information on common law and marriage in Quebec and Canada, but not that much on the retirement system. And since most of the people who are listening are from other countries, I think that there are two peculiarities of the Canadian system that you need to know to understand exactly what you did. The first one is that the public retirement system will compensate you for about 25% of your lifetime earnings. It's not very generous, and it's less generous than in most European countries. The second one is that survivor's pension is the same for married and unmarried couples, which you won't find in the United States, for instance. So those are two elements of retirement system I think you need to know to understand what you did. And now that I've said that, I'll take questions. So I think Shoshana had one.
Very interesting paper. I have lots of questions and I'm just going to try to limit them, but maybe I'll give you 3. So first question I have, you have a variable born outside of Canada in your control, and I wonder whether you should also control for born outside of Quebec to the extent that Quebec has different laws from other states. I forgot already which one of my papers, but I guess it's one with Olivia Ecker-Jaffe on common law marriage. I mentioned it in my presentation. I know that Ontario switched from community property towards community properties, I think in 1978, and the rest of the English-speaking Canada doesn't have community property, and some of the elements in your story are dependent on the existence of community property in Quebec. So that's one thing. I just wanted to verify that your respondents are just one part of a couple. So they tell you about the other. So that's of course a big potential problem that hard to avoid, but you might want to include in all your regressions whether the respondents were the male or the female, because I think it would be very different. There's probably, maybe I'm prejudiced, but there might be more cases of men who misrepresent their earnings to their wife or their female companion and vice versa. So that would be important. And I also wonder to what extent you want to separate by age group within your categories of 25 to 50, because you may want to look at the age at which a majority of your respondents do have savings, and then split the sample for those under that age and the ones after that age who probably are much more serious about their savings decisions, because most people at age 25 or 26, they might still be in graduate school or, traveling around the world and not thinking about this at all. In terms of the review of the literature, I think you might want to pay attention to the Far East. I'm aware that in Korea, South Korea, the government requires that married couples, they don't have much de facto unions over there, but the government requires that the married couples each have their own individual savings accounts. I'm not aware of another country that has that policy, but I think I personally think it's a great policy, and that would be a good, even though I don't like too much forcing people to do things, but this, because we do know that it often is the case that the women remain, as you mentioned, underprivileged in if there is a separation or a death. Okay, I think I asked enough questions. Thank you.
Veux-tu commencer à répondre? You want to start, Maude? Or all the...
Should we answer immediately or gather a few questions? Okay.
There are already enough.
Yeah, of course. So yeah, regarding born outside of Quebec, it's true that I think it would be very interesting, but if I'm not mistaken, I don't think we have that information, right, in the data set. So I need to verify this. I don't know, Hélène, if you remember on top of your head, but I don't think we have it. But I agree, it would be interesting and something to do maybe if we, you know, if we use data from like Statistics Canada and multiple provinces, try to compare. Yeah, I think that would be fascinating. Regarding, yeah, you're right, the respondents. So we know only so it's the answer of just one respondent, and so it's whoever answered the phone, right, or received the email invite for the web sample. So, and we agree that it's a limitation, especially because I think in light of Hélène's and others' work before in qualitative study, I think when you hear about the two respondents, sometimes they don't even agree, like
on the money management.
On the money management. So I think it would be really great to eventually collect from two respondents if we can. But of course, you know, like in a larger sample, this raises the costs. I think quite a lot. So, but regarding the so we have several controls for who is answering the phone, and including, so if it's a woman or a man, and also for like if it's the primary earner that's answering or not. And so I have the results here, and so it doesn't change anything, like it's not significant if it's a woman or a man, neither like who is it, the primary earner or not. So it doesn't seem like that those characteristics are really influencing the answer. About age, so I think that's actually a really good idea, maybe trying to see if there are like qualitative breaks, because the one thing that's interesting about age in the paper, and I have like some of the results and backup slides, but basically if you put it, so we have like a continuous variable as a control for age, and this is not really related to the redistributive management. What is very related is the age difference between the spouses. So with more age difference, they're less likely to, or they're more likely, I'm sorry, to employ an independent saving strategy, right? Which makes sense because perhaps you know, with different ages, you don't put the same, you're not at the same point regarding retirement. But yeah, so this is what comes up. But it would be interesting to try to see if there's like a qualitative break at some point between, like, for example, I don't know, after 40 or something like this. And then, yeah, about Korea, and I think it's fascinating that they have this mandatory maybe savings account. And I don't know if you have a specific paper, but I'd like to read more about this, especially because, so in the way we ask the question, right, about redistributive savings, I think it's interesting because it allows us to just let people sort of define how they see it. But one question this raises is, for example, if like a lower income partner is saying, oh yeah, we are redistributive, right? My husband, part of, yeah, right? Part of his savings are for me. But then if they're not in an account in which, you know, with the person's name on it, then like if something happens, they might not be shared. So yeah, so that's why I think the question we employed is both, like, it has advantages, but also disadvantages.
Thank you.
Thank
you for your questions.
Thank you for your comments and questions.
Yeah.
Are there any other questions?
Are there any other questions? I've asked people to raise their virtual hand because I can't see everyone's camera.
Benoît, il y a Il y a des gens qui ont posé des questions dans le chat.
Was
I have more if you.
Well,
if you
there
want.
were a few questions in the chat. Maybe you want to have a look to the chat, Maud and Hélène, and answer some of them.
Okay.
Yeah, so I think the first one is from someone called Bourreau 5. So
Cécile.
Oh, Cécile. Sorry, Cécile, thank
Yes.
you. Can you give some example of redistributive strategies in terms of retirement? So yeah, that would be something like, for example, if someone doesn't have an income allowing him or her to put in her own account, using her own money. So for example, someone could, the partner could directly contribute to an account in the name of the lower income partner, so that the retirement savings become more similar across partners. Or as we just mentioned, perhaps like say something like, well, those savings in that particular account, they belong to both of us, but then without necessarily having the name of the person on the account, which is trickier, but it could happen for like fiscal reasons, right? For example, in Canada, there are like kind of like 401ks in the US, right? So tax deferred that are retirement account that are called like RRSPs. And so for an higher income earner, it's very advantageous to contribute to an account in his or her name, right? Because then the person can benefit from the tax return. So there could be reasons why, for example, even though if this person really wants to share the savings with his or her partner, but it would be better for him or her to have it all in an RRSP account in his or her name. So it could be like, in this sense, redistributive, but then it raises an issue of what happens if ever something comes up with the relationship and the breakups.
Yes. If they are married, they will share all those things, but if they are in common law,
it's
the
true.
name on the saving that will belong to the spouse. There is a question. Could you control for the length of premarital cohabitation, if any?
Yeah, so there's a control for union duration. So both for married and cohabiting couples, it identifies the number of years since the beginning of cohabitation, first cohabitation, even premarital. And this is a very strong predictor, unsurprisingly, of redistributive versus independent. So the longer it has been, the more likely a redistributive strategy is.
There is another question. Could you remind us what are your expectations regarding the individual strategy according to the legal status?
Yeah, so the idea was basically to say that often there's this idea that common law partners are really individualistic and that they select this form of union as a way to avoid obligation, to share and to pool money. And so we wanted to like help maybe nuance this view and highlight that cohabiting couples sometimes are heterogeneous, right? And that, so one form of this heterogeneity is that in Quebec, in part because, as Hélène mentioned, for fiscal purposes, married couples are often treated similarly, right, as cohabiting couples. And so many people go into cohabitation not really knowing that their rights and responsibilities toward each other are different compared to the married. And so their motive for choosing cohabitation over marriage isn't necessarily to be more individualistic. It can be other things. For example, they don't want to be, they see a religious connotation to marriage. And so in that sense, we expected that the behaviors, right, the redistributive behaviors of cohabiting couples who are not even aware of the legal distinctions would be closer to those of married couples than are the behaviors of cohabiting couples who actually know about this legal difference and can be expected to, in a way, select cohabitation against marriage precisely for to avoid obligations. So that was the logic. Yeah.
There's one question from Shoshana, but I just want to add something related to the length of premarital cohabitation. In Quebec, among the French-speaking population, which is about 80%, for the last 30 years, I think, virtually nobody marries before moving together. So marriage is something that occurs or not among people who are already living together. So that's really the important thing to understand the context. So should I add another question?
We don't hear you. Could you?
Okay. So as you were talking, I was reminded of a study by Frances Woolley from Carleton and in university, and her co-author, whose name escapes me now, but I published that paper before I had a journal. It was in the book on marriage and the economy. And they interviewed a sample of people, couples, both couples, in Ottawa. And the dependent variable was whether they had a joint account. It was about all their bank accounts. And you should read that paper because it's very related to what you're doing and maybe you're aware of it. So that's the first thing. And the other thing I also wanted to tell you that my journal, the Review of Economics of the Household, has published a paper using South Korean data about, you know, what these savers do, in case you're not aware of it. Thank you.
I would like to comment on that comment regarding bank accounts. So I made about 150 interviews, qualitative interviews, and in about half of these samples, we were interviewing both spouses. And so regarding bank accounts, we noticed that there is a difference between the way people manage money and the kind of bank accounts they are using. And in our big sample of 350 interviewees, we crossed those two. We asked people how they manage money, and we asked them what kind of bank account they have. And it fits only in 50% of, because people use personal accounts, but both spouses have the codes to go to the bank they're using. So what I am trying to say is that bank account doesn't say much, even because it's totally different when you ask people how they manage money. Sometimes they have this separate bank accounts, but they pool the money. So yeah, it's two different things.
Yeah, but I forgot to mention that in her study, she found that there's also the effect of whether the couple is de facto or married. It does matter the way you would expect, and it's compatible with your findings. So you might want to cite them. And also they have a finding that the age difference between the man and the woman matter in the direction that you find. And they also use a logistic function about whether, because there's three possibilities, whether they are banking together, or they each have their own account, and it's their own account. Is the principal account under the woman's name or the man's name? So they also have something about the degree of redistribution inside the couple. So it's really a study that's compatible with yours.
I think I read it. I think I know what you're talking about. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you. And also about the South Korea paper, I'm aware of it. It was actually one of the papers that, like, you know, launched us into wanting to study the question of
Oh,
retirement report. So yeah, that's great.
to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, I don't see any more raised hands. So, and we've been together for about an hour. So I think it's the end of our session. Thank you very much, Maud and Inan. Thank you for, to everyone else for being there and taking part in our virtual seminars around the clock. Next seminar is next week, if I'm not mistaken, and it's about research in Latin America. We've got a paper by Wanda Cabella, which is here today, and by, I can't remember her first name, Palma. So see you next week. And remember, we are bound to assemble some kind of a special issue with contributions to the seminars. So if you're interested to publish something in that special issue, write a note to Julie or I. Thank you very much. See you next week.
Thank you so much.
Well,
Bye.
Bye, guys.
Bye.